air was sharp with the cold bite of autumn, but the night didn't feel right. Maren Vale knew the sounds of her pack, howls carrying across the pines, the low rumble of patrols returning. But tonight, there was nothing. Not a single voice, in the dark. She woke to the smell first. Smoke. Thick, acrid, burning pine and fir. Her bare feet hit the floor before she could think. She yanked her coat from the chair and shoved her arms through, stumbling toward the cabin door. The moment she stepped outside, the world lit in shades of fire. Flames licked the treetops. Shadows of wolves tore through the village, some running, others falling, unmoving. The crack of bones and the sound of snarls filled the air. Somewhere, close, a scream broke and then went silent. "Maren!" A voice, Elias, her beta, came from the left. He burst through the smoke, muzzle red, one ear torn. "Run! Now!" She shook her head. "Where's my father? The Alpha?" Elias grabbed, her arm hard enough to bruise. "You can't help him. Go." Another howl, short, sharp, cut through the chaos. The sound was wrong, desperate. She'd never heard it from her father before. Her chest clenched. Elias. A shape lunged through the smoke, not one of theirs. Its fur was matted, eyes cold as glass. Elias shifted in a flash, throwing himself between her and the attacker. The two hit the ground in a tangle of fur and teeth. "Maren! Run!" Elias's voice was muffled in his half-shifted form, but the command was clear. She ran. Through the burning village, past the scent of blood so heavy it turned her stomach, into the deeper forest, where the trees still stood tall. Branches whipped her face. Roots caught at her feet, but she didn't stop until the light of the flames faded behind her. When she finally stumbled, gasping for air, she realized the howls had stopped, every last one. Maren didn't know how long she'd been moving. Hours, maybe. Her body ached and the cold seeped into her bones. She kept her ears tuned to the forest. Every snap of a branch made her flinch. Whoever attacked her pack might still be hunting. Her thoughts spiraled. Why now? Who would risk war? With us? The Vale pack wasn't large, but they weren't weak either. Her father had kept peace with the surrounding alphas for years. A distant sound broke her thoughts. A low growl. She froze, scanning the trees. It came again, closer this time. Not wild, controlled, purposeful. A shadow stepped from the trees ahead. A man, tall, broad-shouldered, with the unmistakable weight of dominance in his stance. His hair was black as the night around them, his eyes a pale, cutting grey. "You're on my land," he said. She swallowed. Theo Ashridge. His gaze swept over her, lingering on the ash smudged into her skin. Vale territory is miles from here. It's gone. The words scraped her throat raw. They're all gone. Theo's jaw tightened, but his expression stayed unreadable. Who? I don't know. Her voice shook despite her effort to steady it. Attackers. Wolves, not ours. He didn't move closer, but she could feel the pressure of his presence like a hand at her back. You're injured. It's nothing. His eyes flicked to the gash on her temple. That's not nothing. He glanced past her, toward the direction she'd come from. If they followed you... They didn't, she cut in. I made sure. Theo's tone sharpened. If they did, you just brought them to my borders. Her hands curled into fists. If I had anywhere else to go, I wouldn't be here. A long moment passed. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Finally, he said, "Come." He turned, expecting her to follow. She hesitated. You're not afraid they'll come for you next? They can try, he said without looking back. The Ashridge Pack's settlement was quieter than Maren expected. A scattering of cabins, nestled in a clearing, smoke drifting lazily from a few chimneys. The wolves who saw her enter did not hide their stares. Theo led her to a cabin set apart from the others. He opened the door, gesturing inside. You can stay here tonight. Just tonight, she asked, until I decide otherwise. His voice left no room for argument. She stepped in. The interior was sparse, a bed, a table, a fireplace with low embers. Warm enough, though. He remained at the doorway. You'll tell me everything you remember. Names, scents, anything. She turned to face him. I told you, I don't know who they were. You know something. His gaze pinned her in place, even if you don't realize it. Maren shook her head. All I know is my pack is dead. For a moment, his expression softened. Barely. Rest. We'll speak in the morning. She wanted to ask why he was helping her at all. Everyone knew Theo Ashridge was as cold as the mountains his pack called home, but his back was already to her, and the door closed with a quiet finality. The next morning, Theo came for her himself. We're going back to Vale territory, he said. If anything's left, we'll find it. They travelled on foot, moving, quickly. The forest air was sharp, the ground hard beneath their boots. Neither spoke much until the scent hit. Ash, old blood, and something else, faint but wrong. When they reached the village, Maren stopped dead. There was nothing, no bodies, no wreckage beyond blackened earth where the cabins had stood. Even the smoke was gone. They took them, she whispered. Theo crouched, pressing his fingers to the ground. Not just the dead. She looked at him sharply. What do you mean? He lifted his gaze. I see drag marks and footprints. He pointed to a faint line in the dirt. Some human, some wolf. Her chest tightened. Why would they take the bodies? He didn't answer right away. To hide. The evidence. Or send a message. Maren's stomach turned. What kind of message? His eyes met hers. That this isn't over. They followed the trail until it split. One path leading deeper into the forest, the other toward the river that marked Ashridge's border. Theo knelt, studying the marks. The group that went toward the river was heavier, carrying weight. Maren's pulse quickened. The bodies. Likely. He stood, scanning the tree line. But the other trail is fresher. Someone stayed behind, or doubled back. A low growl came from the trees ahead. Both stilled. Theo's voice dropped. Stay behind me. A wolf stepped out from the shadows. Not one she recognized. Its fur was dark, eyes cold. It didn't attack, just watched them, then turned and loped into the forest. Theo glanced at her. It wants us to follow. That's a trap. Probably, he said, starting after it. Against her better judgment, she followed. They didn't catch the wolf that lured them. It slipped away in the thick underbrush, leaving only the fading sound of paws on leaves. By the time they returned to Ashridge territory, the sun was dropping low, bleeding red into the tree line. As they entered the main clearing, heads turned. The stares were sharper this time, measured, assessing. A tall woman with copper hair stepped forward. You brought her back again? Her tone wasn't loud, but the edge in it carried. Theo didn't slow his stride. She's under my protection. That wasn't my question, Alpha. Maren looked between them, sensing the weight of the exchange. Theo kept walking, forcing her to either follow or stand awkwardly in the center of a pack that clearly wanted her gone. Inside the cabin, Theo closed the door behind them. That was Kira, he said. My beta. She doesn't like me. She doesn't trust you, he corrected. There's a difference. Maren crossed her arms. And you? Which is it? He met her gaze without flinching. I don't trust you, but I believe you're not my enemy. Yet. His bluntness caught her off guard. She turned away, staring into the low fire. You said you wanted information. Then you keep looking at me like I'm the problem. Theo moved to the table, pulling a rolled map from the shelf. You might be the only living witness to whatever's coming. That makes you valuable and dangerous. To you. To everyone. The door opened abruptly. Kira stepped inside without knocking, eyes narrowing at Maren before turning to Theo. The council sent a runner. They want you in the valley in 3 days. It's about her. Theo didn't look surprised. Of course, it is. The next day, Theo took Maren farther into Ashridge land, away from the village. They reached a clearing where the grass was disturbed, dirt freshly turned. A row of small wooden markers stood in the earth. Maren recognized the crude carvings, names of Ashridge wolves. They were my father's men, Theo said quietly. Killed last winter in a border ambush. She glanced at him. By the same people who attacked my pack? He shook his head. No, but the result's the same. Wolves gone, families left without answers. Maren crouched by one of the markers, tracing the weathered grooves. You bury your dead here? When we have bodies, he said. Her throat tightened. You think I'll never find them? I think, Theo said, that if we do, you won't want to see them. They stood in silence for a moment. Then he added, We're not just hunting killers, Maren. We're hunting people who want war. She met his gaze. Then we stop. Them before they get it. That night, Maren joined Theo in the main hall for dinner. The long table was filled with pack members, the air thick with the smell of roasted meat and spiced root vegetables. Conversations faltered as she entered. Kira sat near the head of the table, speaking low to a man on her right. When she looked up and saw Maren, her eyes cooled. Guest of honor, Kira said dryly. Or should I say, our new resident? Maren sat at the far end, ignoring the bait. Theo's voice carried over the table. She's here until I say, otherwise. Anyone with an issue can speak to me directly. A younger wolf, halfway down the table, muttered, We might not get the chance if she brings trouble here. Theo's gaze snapped to him. You just did. The man dropped his eyes to his plate. Maren ate in silence, but the weight of every stare pressed on her back. She didn't need to hear the whispers to know what they were thinking, that she was a threat, a liability, or worse, a spy. When the meal ended, Theo walked her out. Don't go anywhere alone, he said. Not everyone here will listen when I tell them to leave you alone. She arched a brow. Including your beta, especially my beta, he said, and kept walking. The next morning, Theo returned from patrol holding something in his hand. He dropped it onto the table in front of her. It was a small pendant, silver, tarnished, the crest etched deep into its face. Her stomach knotted. That's ours, my pack's. Found it 3 miles from here, Theo said. On my patrol route. Her mind raced. It could have been dropped before. No, he cut in. The soil was damp from last night's rain. It hasn't been there long. Her pulse thudded. Then they were here. Or someone wants us to think they were, Theo said. Either way, it's bait. She picked up the pendant, running, her thumb over the familiar markings. It was Elias's. She remembered him wearing it the night of the attack. If this is bait, she asked, what happens if we take it? He leaned closer. We'll find out. By midday, they were moving, fast through the trees, following faint tracks that led away from where the pendant was found. The trail wound toward the southern border. Vale land once, now empty. They stopped at the river. On the far bank, the land sloped into disputed territory. Theo's voice was low. Once we cross, we're not welcome. Maren studied the far, sighed. Do you think they're watching? I know they are. They crossed anyway. The air felt different here. Heavier, quieter. After an hour, they found it. A patch of trampled ground, the scent of wolf strong. Theo crouched, examining the soil. 2, maybe 3 wolves, not long gone. Before Maren could speak, a howl echoed from somewhere ahead. Not Vale, not Ashridge. Theo rose slowly. That's a call to move. To move where? She asked. His expression darkened. Away from here. Now! They turned back, moving quickly, but the sound of movement followed them through the trees, faster than before. By the time they made it back into Ashridge territory, dusk was closing in. Theo's patrol met them at the border, relief flickering briefly before worry replaced it. One of the younger wolves, Bram, shifted back into human form as they approached. The council's messenger arrived. They're waiting in the main hall. Theo didn't break stride. Did they say why? Bram's eyes flicked to Maren. They didn't need to. Inside the hall, the council's representative, a sharp-eyed man named Corvin, stood near the long table. He didn't bow, even for an alpha. Theo Ashridge, we've heard troubling news. Theo motioned for Maren to stand beside him, ignoring the ripple of disapproval from his own pack. Go on. Corvin's gaze moved to Maren, cool and appraising. The Vale survivor. Rumor says you're sheltering her. You can call it sheltering, Theo said. I call it keeping an eyewitness alive. Corvin's tone hardened. She's a risk. If her presence draws the same danger that destroyed her pack, you put your own people in the line of fire. Maren kept her voice steady. If I'd stayed out there, I'd be dead. You think that helps anyone? Corvin didn't look at her again. The council recommends you hand her over to our custody. Recommend? Theo's voice was flat. Or order. Corvin's silence was answer enough. Theo stepped closer, the room cooling with his presence. Tell the council I'll consider their words, and tell them I don't hand over wolves who've sought my protection. Corvin's mouth twitched, but he inclined his head. Then consider this my warning. Keep her here, and you'll be standing against the council. When he was gone, Kira approached, tension in every line of her body. You're making enemies. We don't need. Theo looked past her to Maren. Maybe. Or maybe they've already made themselves my enemies. The next morning, Theo knocked on Maren's cabin door before stepping inside. If the council's involved, this goes deeper than we thought. Maren sat at the small table, hands wrapped around a cup of tea. You think they know who attacked my pack? I think they know something. He sat opposite her, and I think we're going to have to work together to find out. Her brow furrowed. I thought we already were. He shook his head. Not really. Until now, you've been reacting. I've been deciding. But if we want answers, you'll have to tell me everything. No matter how small, no matter how dangerous. Maren hesitated. Even if it makes you see me differently. His grey eyes didn't waver. Especially then. She drew a slow breath. There was someone, my brother, Callan. He disappeared months before the attack. My father thought he'd gone rogue, but the night of the slaughter, I thought I smelled... She stopped herself. You thought you smelled him, Theo finished. She nodded. It doesn't make sense. If he was there, why didn't he... She broke off, shaking her head. Theo leaned back. Then he's either dead, or he's not the brother you remember. 2 days later, they crossed the southern border again. This time, Theo didn't take a patrol, just the two of them, moving light and fast. The trail they followed led into disputed land, a dense stretch of forest where even the birds seemed wary. Who controls this territory? Maren asked. Theo's answer was clipped. Officially? No one. Unofficially? Whoever's strong enough that week. It wasn't long before they found signs of recent movement, broken branches, paw prints, and the faintest whiff of unfamiliar. Wolves. They followed until the trees thinned into a clearing. On the far side stood a cluster of rundown cabins. A few figures lingered outside, their posture tense the moment they spotted Theo. A man stepped forward, scar cutting across his jaw. Ashridge. Thought you didn't come this far south anymore. Times change, Theo said evenly. We're looking for information. The man's eyes slid to Maren. You're not from here. She's with me, Theo said. We're tracking wolves who crossed into Vale land. The man smiled without warmth. Plenty of wolves cross borders. You'll have to be more specific. Theo took a step closer. They took bodies with them. That wiped the smile away. They left the settlement with little more than a vague direction, northwest, toward the old logging road. The locals hadn't been willing to give much, but their unease was telling. As they walked, Maren kept glancing over her shoulder. "We're being followed." "I know," Theo said. "Why aren't we doing something about it?" "Because if they want to follow, I want to see where they take us." The shadow kept its distance, moving when they moved, stopping when they stopped. Every time Maren tried to catch a clear look, it slipped behind the trees. Finally, Theo slowed. "Stay here," he murmured, and moved ahead silently. Maren waited, scanning the trees. The quiet stretched, too long. Then, movement behind her. She turned sharply, but whatever had been there was already gone. A moment later, Theo reappeared. "They're gone," he said. "Either they didn't like what they saw, or they're planning something." "Which do you think?" she asked. His expression didn't change. "The latter." The attack came at dusk. They were following the old logging road when a branch snapped overhead. A heartbeat later, 3 wolves burst from the undergrowth. 2, in full shift, 1 still in human form, but armed with a blade. Theo moved instantly, intercepting the first wolf mid-leap and slamming it to the ground. The second lunged for Maren. She sidestepped, grabbing a fallen branch and swinging hard, catching it across the snout. The armed man went for Theo, blade flashing. Theo caught his wrist, twisting until the weapon fell, then drove his fist into the man's jaw. The wolf Maren struck came again, teeth snapping. She stumbled back, and Theo was suddenly there, shoving her aside as the wolf's jaws clamped down on his arm. He growled, shifting partially, forcing the attacker off. Blood ran down his forearm, dark in the fading light. The 3 assailants retreated suddenly, vanishing into the trees as quickly as they'd come. Maren caught Theo's arm, her voice sharp. "You're hurt." "It's nothing," he said, though his jaw was tight. "We need to move before they circle back." She didn't argue, but she stayed close, her hand brushing his as they pushed into the shadows of the forest, both knowing this wasn't the end of it. By the time they found shelter, Theo's arm was bleeding heavily. He tried to downplay it, but the sluggish way he moved told a different story. They came upon an abandoned hunter's cabin deep in the pines, half hidden under a blanket of ivy. Theo pushed the door open with his shoulder and stepped inside first, scanning the space. "It's clear," he said, and let her in. The cabin was 1 room, small, but with a working fireplace and a cot in the corner. Dust hung in the air. "Sit," Maren said, nodding toward the cot. "I'm fine." "Sit," she repeated, sharper this time. He gave her a look, but obeyed, lowering himself onto the edge of the cot. She found a rag and a dented metal basin in the corner, filling it with water from a barrel outside. When she returned, she knelt beside him and began cleaning the wound. His arm was solid under her hands, the muscles tensed from holding still. "You're not gentle," he muttered. "You're not easy to work on," she countered. A faint smirk touched his mouth. "You've done this before." "First time on, an alpha," she said, "but not the first wolf I've patched up." When she tied off the bandage, she met his gaze. "You could have been killed back there." "Not while you were in front of me." Her breath caught, but he stood before she could respond, moving to the window. "I'll take first watch. You sleep." "You're injured." "I'm still the better choice," he said, without arrogance, just fact. The fire burned low through the night. Maren woke once to find Theo still at the window, eyes scanning the dark beyond the glass. "You didn't wake me," she said quietly. "You needed rest." She pushed herself up. "You think they'll come back?" "They wanted us alive," he said. "That worries me more than if they'd tried to kill us." Her brow furrowed. "Why?" "Dead wolves send a message. Alive ones can be used." She thought of the pendant Elias had worn. "You think they took my pack for leverage," I think, Theo said, someone's playing a long game, and I don't like being a piece on their board. Before dawn, they left the cabin. Theo's arm was stiff, but he kept a steady pace. The forest was quiet again, too quiet. As they neared Ashridge territory, Theo's tone hardened. Whoever attacked us crossed into disputed land without fear. That means they have protection from someone powerful. The council? She asked. He didn't answer, but the look in his eyes was all the answer she needed. Back in the village, Kira was waiting. She took one look at Theo's bandaged arm, and her jaw tightened. Who? Unknown, Theo said. But we know where they came from. Kira glanced at Maren. And she's still alive. Theo's voice was flat. She's the reason I am. Maren kept her tone even. We followed their trail into a territory you didn't tell me about. They didn't seem surprised to see us. That's because they've been avoiding us for months, Kira said. We sent envoys. They disappeared. No answers. No bodies. Theo stepped closer. And you didn't think that was worth mentioning before? Kira's mouth thinned. I didn't think you'd risk going there without backup. I'll risk worse, Theo said, if it means getting the truth. Maren watched the tension between them and realized something. Kira's mistrust wasn't just about her. It was about the danger Theo was willing to walk into for answers. 2 days later, Bram returned from patrol carrying a torn scrap of fabric. He laid it on the table in front of Theo. Maren froze. The scent rising from it was faint but unmistakable. Callan! Theo looked at her sharply. Your brother? She nodded, heart pounding. This is his. I'd know it anywhere. Bram glanced between them. We found it caught on a branch near the ridge. No other tracks, no blood. Theo's gaze lingered on the fabric. If he's here, he's hiding. Maren's voice was low. Or being hidden. Theo didn't dismiss it. Either way, we'll find him. But if he's part of this, he's my brother, she said. That doesn't make him innocent, Theo replied, his tone gentler than his words. The following morning, one of the scouts arrived with something clutched in a hand, a tuft of fur, coarse and black with a faint, metallic smell. Theo took it, turning it over in his fingers. It's marked. Maren stepped closer. Carved into the skin at the root was a small symbol. 2 intersecting lines, sharp as claws. I've seen that before, she murmured. My father used to tell stories about a group of wolves who worked outside any pack. Assassins. Theo's jaw tightened. They're not stories. Kira stepped into the room. If they're involved, this is bigger than the council. They work for the highest bidder. Theo looked at Maren. Which means someone paid for the destruction of Vale, and possibly for you, she said. He didn't deny it. Instead, he set the tuft of fur down on the table. Then we find out who and why before they come collecting again. The rain came down in sheets the night they brought the stranger. Bram and 2 other scouts shoved a half-shifted man through the door of the main hall. His clothes were torn, and his left arm hung at an unnatural angle. Theo met them at the threshold. Where? Near the western ridge, Bram said. He was tracking us, tried to run. The man's lip curled. You think I came here for you? Theo nodded to Bram. Put him in the cellar. The cellar beneath the main hall was a cold, windowless space of stone and timber. The stranger was chained to an iron ring in the wall. When Theo stepped inside, Maren followed. The man's eyes flicked to her, sharp despite the shadows. The Vale girl! Maren's stomach tightened. You know me? I know what's left of you, he said with a grin. Theo's voice cut through the tension. Who are you working for? I don't work, the man replied. I'm paid. By who? Theo asked. The man leaned back against the wall, chains rattling. Kill me and you'll never know. Theo's tone dropped to a dangerous low. If I wanted you dead, you'd be in the ground already. The stranger's smirk faltered. Maren stepped forward. What about my pack? Were you there? He met her gaze without blinking. I was. They left the prisoner under guard. For the night, Theo closed the cellar door behind them, his expression unreadable. "He's baiting you," Theo said. "He's telling the truth," Maren replied. "I saw it in his eyes." Theo's gaze sharpened. "What exactly do you think you saw?" She hesitated, then said, "There's something I didn't tell you. The night of the attack, before it happened, I saw someone on the ridge. I thought it was Callan. I didn't say anything because I wasn't sure." Theo stopped walking. "You kept that from me?" "I didn't know if it meant anything," she said, her voice low. "It means everything," Theo said. "If your brother was there, he's either with them or they've got him." Maren swallowed hard. "You think I wouldn't want to know?" "I think you're afraid of the answer," Theo said, then walked ahead without looking back. The next day, the wind carried the scent of strangers long before the scouts saw them. By the time Theo reached the border, a group of wolves stood and waiting on the far side of the river. At their head was Alpha Rourke, broad, scarred, his eyes a predator's calm. "You've got something that's mine," Rourke said without preamble. Theo's stance didn't shift. "Name it." "The girl," Rourke said, nodding toward Maren, who stood a few paces behind Theo. "She's wanted for questioning in my territory." "She's under my protection," Theo said. Rourke's mouth curved. "Protection or possession?" Theo stepped forward until they were a breath apart. "Try and take her." Rourke's wolves bristled, but he lifted a hand. "Not today, but soon. The council's eyes are on you, Ashridge. Don't forget that." When they were gone, Theo turned to Maren. "That's the second Alpha who's come for you. We're running out of time." That night, Theo didn't risk returning to the village. Instead, they took shelter in an old trapper's cabin deep in the woods. The single room was small, the walls lined with tools and old furs. Theo checked the perimeter before coming inside. "You take the bed," he said. Maren arched a brow. "And you?" "I'll take the chair." They ate in silence. For a while, the fire snapping in the hearth. Finally, Maren said, "You think the prisoner will talk?" "He will," Theo said. "One way or another." She studied him. "You've done this before." He didn't look at her. Enough to know there's always a price for answers. When she lay down later, she could still hear him moving quietly by the fire, keeping watch. It was the second night in a row he hadn't slept. By morning, the rain had stopped, but the air carried a damp chill. They returned to the village to find Kira waiting at the hall. "The prisoner's been talking," she said. "You're going to want to hear this." In the cellar, the man looked worse than before, sweat on his brow, his injured arm hanging limp. "You said you were paid," Theo began. "By who?" The man's gaze slid to Maren. "By someone who smells like her." Maren's breath caught. "Callan." "Your brother," the man said with a grin. "He's the one who hired us." Theo's voice was like steel. "To do what?" "To wipe Vale from the map," the man said. "Every last one." Maren's pulse roared in her ears. "You're lying," but he only smiled wider. "Then go find him, see what he says." Theo turned to her, his expression unreadable. "Looks like we've got our next trail." The morning after the confession, the hall was tense. News of Callan's supposed betrayal had spread among the core warriors, though Theo had ordered silence outside their ranks. Bram leaned against the map table, tracing a route with his finger. If the prisoner's telling the truth, Hollow Ridge is the likeliest place Callan would hole up. It's secluded, high ground, and only 2 access points. Theo glanced at Maren. "Ever been there?" She shook her head. "It's Vale territory, or it was." "Then you'll ride with me," Theo said. Bram frowned. "You're sure that's wise? If he's there?" "That's exactly why," Theo cut in. Maren's jaw tightened. "I can handle seeing him." Theo's gaze softened just slightly. "It's not just seeing him I'm worried about." They left at dawn, riding hard toward Hollow Ridge. The forest thickened as they went, shadows falling earlier than they should have. Every now and then, Theo would glance over his shoulder, scanning the trees as if expecting trouble. When they stopped at the base of the ridge, he dismounted first, offering her a hand down. "You stay behind me," he said quietly. Maren hesitated. "And if he runs?" Theo's eyes narrowed. "He won't run. Not from you." They climbed the ridge in silence, the path slick from earlier rain. At the crest, a scattering of old stone huts stood in the clearing. A figure stepped out from one of them, tall, broad-shouldered, with the same dark hair and green eyes as Maren. "Callan," she breathed. He smiled, though it didn't reach. His eyes. "Little sister, I was starting to think you were dead." Theo's stance shifted. "We need to talk." Callan's gaze moved to him. "So you're the one she ran to." "I'm the one keeping her alive," Theo said evenly. Callan's expression sharpened. "From what? I'm not your enemy." "That's not what the man in my cellar says," Theo replied. "He says you paid him." Callan laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You think I'd pay anyone to touch my own pack?" Maren stepped forward. "Did you?" His smile faded. "No, but I know who did." Theo's voice was low. "Name." Callan's eyes flicked to the tree line. "Not here. They're watching." Before Theo could react, a sharp whistle split the air, and movement flashed between the trees. The first arrow struck the ground at Theo's feet. The second grazed the shoulder of Callan's coat. Theo pushed Maren behind him, drawing his blade in the same motion. "Move!" Callan pulled a knife from his belt and joined him in facing the attackers. Shapes moved fast through the trees, half-shifted, wolves with painted faces. Bram's voice rang from the ridge path behind them. "We've got company!" It was chaos. Blades, claws, and the crack of bows. Maren kept low, ducking behind the remains of an old stone wall. She could hear Theo's voice, low and steady even in the fight, calling orders to hold the line. One attacker lunged toward her, teeth bared. But Callan was there first, his knife burying into the man's side. "You're welcome," Callan said, yanking her to her feet. They fought their way back toward the path, Theo guarding the rear until the last of the painted wolves broke off and vanished into the forest. When it was over, the clearing was littered with broken arrows and the scent of blood. Theo turned to Callan. "Start talking, now." They retreated to a narrow hunting shack halfway down the ridge. Inside, it smelled of old wood smoke and damp furs. Callan leaned against the wall, breathing hard. "You're hunting the wrong people, the ones who came. For Vale weren't mercenaries. They were working for Rourke." Theo's jaw clenched. "You've got proof?" "More than proof," Callan said. "I've been tracking them since the attack. I found the trail, supplies, weapons, even orders with his mark. But I couldn't get close enough without being spotted." Maren's voice was tight. "Then, why not come to me? Why let me think?" "Because they were watching you too," Callan said. "If they thought we were working together, we'd both be dead." Theo studied him for a long moment. "You're saying Rourke ordered the slaughter to force you out?" Callan nodded. "And he's not done. He's planning to move against Ashridge next." Theo didn't react outwardly, but Maren could see the calculation behind his eyes. "Then we hit him before he's ready." The ride back to Ashridge was quiet, tension thick between all three of them. Callan kept his distance, his eyes scanning the trees, while Theo seemed to be weighing every word that had been said. By the time they reached the hall, night had fallen. Kira met them at the door, her eyes flicking to Callan with suspicion. "This is him?" she asked Theo. "This is him," Theo confirmed. "He's staying. Under guard." Callan smirked. "Nice hospitality you've got here." Theo ignored him. "Kira, double the watches. If Rourke's moving, I want to know before he draws breath." Later, in the quiet of the war room, Theo and Maren stood over the map. "You trust him?" Theo asked. Maren hesitated. "I trust he's telling the truth about Rourke. The rest, I'm not sure yet." Theo's gaze lingered on her. Then, We treat him like an ally we might have to kill. Outside, Callan stood in the shadows, listening. The faintest smile crossed his face. The morning after their return from Hollow Ridge, the Ashridge Hall was already alive with the scent of cooking meat and the low murmur of voices. Maren entered the long dining room to find Callan seated at the far end of the table, 2 guards at his back. He looked perfectly comfortable, tearing into a loaf of bread as if he owned the place. Theo sat across from him, expression unreadable. Bram leaned against the wall, arms folded, clearly not happy about this arrangement. Callan looked up as Maren approached. "Morning, little sister. Sleep well?" She ignored the jab and sat beside Theo. "Did you?" "I've had worse beds," Callan replied, glancing toward his guards. "Though the company could be better." Theo set his cup down. "Get used to it. You move through this hall without one of them, and you won't make it far." Callan smirked. "What? Afraid I'll run?" "I'm afraid of what will happen if you don't," Theo said flatly. Bram stepped forward. "Alpha, we can't keep him here forever. He's a risk." Theo didn't look at him. "He's also the only one who's gotten close to Rourke's supply lines without being killed. Until we move, he stays." Callan raised his brows at Maren. "You must be something special for him to break his own rules." Theo's gaze cut to him. "Finish your breakfast." By midday, a rider arrived at the gates, carrying a sealed letter with the crest of the Northern Council. Theo broke the seal in the war room, Maren and Bram at his side. His jaw tightened as he read. "They're calling for a hearing in 3 days, Theo said. "They've heard whispers about the Vale attack, and about Callan." Bram muttered. "That didn't take long." Maren frowned. "A hearing for what?" "For whether Ashridge is harbouring a traitor," Theo replied. "If they decide we are, they'll strip my right to lead and put the territory under council control." Bram slammed his palm against the table. "Rourke's behind this," Theo nodded. "Which means we go, but on our terms. If they want Callan, they'll have to hear our case." Maren's voice was quiet but firm. "Then I'll speak too." Theo's eyes softened slightly. "If you do, they'll turn their questions on you." "Let them," she said. "I'm done letting Rourke tell the story." Callan entered without knocking, holding a half-eaten apple. "What story are we telling?" Theo handed him the letter. Callan read it and laughed under his breath. "Perfect. A council room full of old wolves. I can't wait." The next 2 days were a blur of preparation. Kira gathered records, patrol reports, trade agreements, anything to prove Ashridge had not supported Vale's destruction. Bram drilled the warriors, ensuring the hall would be guarded in Theo's absence. Theo spent hours in the map room with Maren, reviewing every detail she could recall from the night of the attack. At one point, she leaned back, rubbing her temples. "It's like trying to remember smoke. I can see flashes, fire, claws, but not the order it happened." "You remember more than you think," Theo said. "And you remember enough to hurt Rourke." She met his gaze. "You really think the council will believe me?" "They don't have to believe you," he said. "They just have to doubt him." Callan lounged in the corner, tossing a coin. "If you want doubt, I can give them plenty, but you're not going to like how." Theo's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Callan shrugged. "I've got names. Wolves Rourke's paid off, hunts he's sabotaged, bribes he's taken. But if I say them out loud, those wolves will run before you can catch them." Theo considered this, then said, "Then don't say them out loud, not until we're ready to strike." The Northern Council's hall was carved into the side of a cliff, high enough that the wind howled around its stone balconies. Theo, Maren and Callan entered together, flanked by guards. The council chamber was circular, lit by tall windows, and the glow of braziers. 12 alphas sat around a long, curved table, their eyes following the newcomers. At the head sat Alder Rowan, the high alpha, his hair silver, but his posture unbent. Theo Ashridge. "Maren Vale, Callan Vale. You stand accused of harbouring a traitor to the Wolf Code, and of conspiring against a recognised pack leader. Alpha Rourke. Theo met his gaze. We're here to answer those charges. The questioning began. Council members fired inquiries about Callan's whereabouts during the attack, Marin's escape, and Theo's choice to shelter her. One councillor, a sharp-faced woman named Selra, leaned forward. And yet you bring Callan Vale into your own hall without trial. Why? Because he has information that will bring the real traitor to justice, Theo said. Selra's eyes narrowed. And who is that? Theo's voice was steady. Rourke. A murmur swept the chamber. Before the council could respond, the heavy doors slammed open. A tall, broad wolf with dark hair and an easy smile strode in, Rourke himself. My apologies for the interruption, he said smoothly. I was told my name might be dragged through the mud today. Thought I'd save you the trouble. Alder Rowan gestured for silence. Rourke, this is a formal hearing. Then hear this, Rourke said, tossing a bundle of parchment onto the table. Signed testimonies from traders, hunters, and guards, each swearing Ashridge has been hoarding weapons and preparing to strike. Theo's jaw tightened. Forgeries. Proof, Rourke countered. And unlike your guests, these witnesses are still alive to speak for themselves. The council's murmurs grew louder. Marin stepped forward. And how many of those witnesses were on your payroll the night Vale burned? Rourke's smile didn't falter. Careful, girl. Accusations can get you killed in these halls. Theo moved subtly closer to her side. So can the truth. Rourke's eyes flicked to him, cold now. Then we'll see whose truth stands when the council votes. The chamber felt smaller as the council deliberated behind closed doors. Theo stood near the window, staring at the windswept cliffs beyond. Marin sat at the far end of the waiting room, elbows on her knees, watching him. Callan paced like a caged wolf. Finally, the doors opened. Alder Rowan stepped into the hall, his voice carrying over the silence. The council has reached its decision. They filed back into the chamber. Theo, Marin, and Callan took their positions at the centre. Alder's gaze was steady. The council does not find sufficient proof to condemn Ashridge for treason. Breath of relief moved through Marin until Alder continued. However, given the gravity of the accusations, the council orders that Callan Vale be remanded into council custody until further investigation is complete. This will be enforced immediately. Callan let out a dry laugh. Of course you do. Theo's jaw tightened. You're making a mistake. He won't live to see that investigation end. Selra, the sharp-faced councillor, rose. If that is so, then perhaps the problem is not with the council's decision, but with the company you keep, Alpha Ashridge. Marin stepped forward. If Callan goes with you, Rourke wins. You know, it. Alder's voice was firm. The decision stands. Guards! 2 council guards moved toward Callan. Theo's hand twitched toward his belt, but Callan's faint smile stopped him. Don't, Ashridge. Let them think they've got me. I've slipped worse cages. The guards seized him, and in moments he was gone. They left the council hall under heavy eyes. Theo's stride was long, clipped, his mind clearly running through every possible outcome. Marin broke the silence first. You think Callan can get out? He's survived this long, Theo said. But the council won't protect him from Rourke, which means we find him before Rourke does. Bram met them, at the base of the cliff with a pair of horses. Bad news? He asked. They took Callan, Theo replied, mounting quickly. We ride hard. We can't let Rourke get home before we do. By the time they reached Ashridge's border, the sun was sinking. A sharp whistle cut through the trees ahead, and 2 scouts emerged. One of them, a wiry young wolf named Dren, looked rattled. Alpha, Dren said. We caught movement on the north ridge. Not ours. Theo's voice was low. How many? 4, maybe 5 packs worth, Dren said. They're carrying Rourke's mark, Bram swore under his breath. He's not waiting for the council to decide anything. He's coming now. Theo looked at Marin. We don't have time to argue strategy in a hall. we make our stand at the gates. By the time they reached the main gates, Ashridge's warriors were already gathering. Kira stood on the wall walk, bow in hand, barking orders to the archers. Theo mounted the steps, scanning the tree line beyond. Shadows moved between the pines, too many to count at a glance. "They'll test the wall before they hit it," Bram said, joining him. Theo's reply was cold and certain. "Then we make sure they regret it." Maren moved among the younger wolves, checking their weapons, speaking quietly to steady their nerves. She caught sight of Theo watching her from above and gave a brief nod. The first attack came with no warning, a volley of arrows whistling through the air. Ashridge's shields rose, wood shuddering under the impact. Then the howls began. Rourke's wolves rushed from the trees, slamming against the gates in waves. The sound of claws on wood and steel filled the night. Bram fought at Theo's side as they drove the first wave back. Kira's arrows sang overhead, dropping wolves before they reached the wall. Maren stayed on the ground, cutting down 2 attackers who breached the outer barricade. Her blade was slick with blood when Theo's voice roared from above. "Hold! The line! Drive them out!" By dawn, the forest was quiet again, but the ground outside the gates was littered with bodies. The gates creaked open just enough for the cleanup to begin. Ashridge wolves moved among the fallen, pulling the wounded inside and piling the dead for burning. Maren found Theo near the southern watchtower, speaking with Kira and Bram. "They weren't here to win," Theo was saying. "They were here to measure us. See how we fight. Next time they'll come stronger." Kira's face was pale but determined. "We can hold if we prepare." Theo's gaze flicked to Maren. "We'll have to. Rourke's not going to give us weeks to recover." Bram crossed his arms. "And if he comes with the council's blessing?" "Then we fight anyway," Theo said. "And we make sure the council sees the truth before they can spin it." Maren stepped closer. "What about Callan? If they move him while we're under attack?" Theo shook his head. "We'll send scouts, quiet ones. If Callan's alive, we'll get him back. But first, we secure Ashridge." The following night, a single figure approached the gates under the moonlight. Dren called down from the wall. "Alpha! It's one of ours!" The gates opened just enough to admit the scout. He stumbled inside, his fur matted with blood. In his hands was a small, wrapped bundle. "It was on the road to the council," the scout gasped. "Guard patrol. Slaughtered. I barely got out." Theo took the bundle and unwrapped it slowly. Inside was a strip of leather torn from a belt. Callan's belt. Stained dark. Maren's stomach twisted. "Is he?" Theo's expression was grim. "Alive, or Rourke would have sent us his head. This is a warning." Bram's voice was low. "Or an invitation." Theo looked toward the dark forest beyond the walls. "Then we'll answer it." Theo had the map spread across the war table, his hand planted on the inked outline of the forest road. Maren stood beside him, her eyes scanning the markings while Bram, Kira and Dren formed a tight circle around them. "They're moving him here," Theo said, tapping a narrow stretch between the northern ravine and the old mines. "Rourke's men like to use the pass at night. It's quiet, and the terrain makes pursuit dangerous." Bram frowned. "It also makes ambushes dangerous." Theo gave a grim nod. "That's why we'll be the ones doing the ambushing." Maren's hand rested lightly on the table. "If Rourke knows we're coming," "He knows," Theo interrupted. "The belt strip was bait, but if we stay still, Callan dies. If we move fast and hit hard, we might pull him out before Rourke has time to choke the trap closed." Kira asked, "How many will you take?" "5 of our fastest," Theo said. "Bram, Dren, Kira, Maren and me." Dren raised a brow. "Small strike." Theo's lips curled in something between a smirk and a snarl. "Small enough to vanish if we need to. Loud enough to make Rourke regret the game." The night air bit at their skin as they moved. They travelled on foot after the first ridge, melting into the forest's shadows. The only sounds were the soft rustle of leaves and the faint crunch of boots on frost. Maren kept her senses stretched, scanning for movement. She caught Theo's scent ahead of her. Sharp, steady, grounding. Dren froze suddenly, holding up a hand. They crouched behind a fallen trunk. From beyond the ridge, faint voices drifted on the wind. Move him faster. Alpha wants him at the mine by first light. Theo leaned close to Maren. 2 guards ahead, more further in. Bram's grin was humorless. I'll take the one on the left. Theo's nod was barely perceptible. They moved like shadows. Silent, coordinated. The 2 guards didn't even get a warning growl before they were dragged into the underbrush. Kira slipped ahead, scouting the next stretch. She returned within moments, her voice low. Campfire up ahead. At least 8 wolves. Callans, chained near the edge. Maren felt her pulse spike. Alive? Kira nodded. Alive. But he's not moving much. Theo's gaze locked on Maren. We go in on my signal. Fast. No hesitation. The camp came into view. A ring of flickering firelight. Shadows stretching long across the frozen ground. Callan sat slumped against a post, wrists bound, head low. Theo didn't wait long. His whistle cut through the night, sharp and commanding. They hit the camp like a breaking wave. Bram and Dren tackled the guards nearest Callan, blades flashing. Kira's arrows dropped 2 wolves before they even rose from their bedrolls. Maren sprinted straight for Callan, her blade catching the firelight as she cut through the chain binding him. Can you stand? He groaned, but forced himself up. Didn't think you'd... He stumbled, and she caught him under the arm. Save it for later, she hissed. Theo tore through 2 attackers with brutal efficiency. Blood sprayed across the frozen dirt. Move! He barked, but before they could retreat, a howl split the night, a sound thick with malice. From the shadows stepped Rourke, his teeth bared in a slow, deliberate smile. Well, Rourke said, voice like gravel. If it isn't Ashridge himself, thought I'd save you for last. The air between Theo and Rourke crackled with tension. The others froze, forming a protective ring around Callan. Rourke's gaze slid to Maren, lingering, with poisonous amusement. And the Veil Girl. Your family's screams still echo nicely in my head. Maren's grip tightened on her blade, but Theo stepped forward, blocking Rourke's line of sight. This ends tonight. Rourke's smirk widened. Agreed. They collided in a blur of motion, claws, steel, and raw force. Theo fought with calculated precision, each strike aimed to cripple. Rourke countered with savage power, his attacks meant to overwhelm. Bram, Dren, and Kira fought off the rest of Rourke's pack, but it was clear this was more than a skirmish. It was personal. Maren pulled Callan back toward the tree line. Stay, on your feet, Callan gritted his teeth. Don't get yourself killed on my account. Theo caught Rourke across the jaw, sending him staggering. But Rourke's counter came quick. A slash across Theo's ribs that left blood soaking his shirt. Theo didn't slow. He drove his shoulder into Rourke, forcing him back toward the fire. You wanted my attention, he growled. Now you've got it. With a final bone-cracking blow, Theo sent Rourke sprawling. The rival Alpha hit the dirt hard, struggling to rise. Theo's voice was cold steel. Run, and you'll never... Stop running. For a moment, Rourke's eyes blazed with hatred. Then, with a low snarl, he signaled a retreat. His surviving wolves melted into the forest. They didn't slow until they were well beyond the ravine. The first pale light of dawn touched the treetops as they reached the border of Ashridge lands. Callan, still leaning heavily on Maren, gave a hoarse chuckle. You really know how to make a rescue noisy. Theo shook his head. We made it. Loud enough that the council will hear about it before Rourke can spin his lies. Bram grinned faintly. And loud enough that he won't forget the taste of dirt for a while. At the gates, Kira helped Callan inside, while Dren vanished toward the watchtower to alert the others. Maren lingered beside Theo. His shirt was torn, the slash along his ribs still bleeding. You should get that looked at. He met her gaze. a faint smile playing at his lips. Later. The moon was sinking low, its pale glow fading into morning. Maren looked toward it, then back at Theo. We didn't choose this fight. No, he said quietly, but we chose each other. In the cold dawn, with the pack gathering around them, they stood together, no longer just survivors, but united under the same moon. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side,